Hello everyone and welcome back to Know Your Developers. If you've been waiting for this episode since 2015, thank you for waiting, and if you didn't even know this channel existed in 2015, thank you for joining us. Know Your Developers is a series where we take a behind-the-scenes look at the men and women responsible for some of our favorite games and try to learn more about them. We find that by looking at the history of what these developers have done, we can make pretty good guesses at what they might be doing next. Now, it's been very close to exactly 3 years since the last episode of Know Your Developers, so we wanted to come back with something big. So, today we'll be looking at a prolific developer whose games have been given new life since they joined with Nintendo. I'm John Reardon, you're watching NWR TV. This is Know Your Developers Episode 6, Monolith Soft. Over the past decade, Monolith Soft has become a household name for Nintendo fans with the launch of one of Nintendo's newest IPs, Xenoblade. And yes, I will be saying Xeno, not Xeno. I am American, and I'm from the Midwest, and that is just how I say that prefix. I apologize for any discomfort it may cause you. Thank you for sticking it out. You're gonna comment down there anyway, aren't you? I know you are. But Xenoblade is just the most recent entry of the Xeno series, and as we trace it back, we find ourselves in the late 80s, over a decade before Monolith Soft's founding, with a man and a woman, Tetsuya Takahashi and Soraya Saga. Oh, how I've missed mispronouncing Japanese names. It's good to have this series back. Takahashi entered the world of video games in his late 20s when he got a job at Nihon Falcom. But he wouldn't stay there for long. Around 1990, Takahashi joined legendary developer Squaresoft. His first job at the company was designing battle graphics for Final Fantasy IV, which released in 1991. In fact, if you've played an SNES RPG, there's a pretty good chance you are familiar with Takahashi's work. Over the next 4 years, he would work on art for Final Fantasy V and VI, along with Secret of Mana and many more. Perhaps his greatest SNES-era work was as the graphics director for Chrono Trigger in 1995. Not even a decade into his career, Takahashi clearly already had an outstanding portfolio. More importantly, however, Squaresoft is where he met and worked with Soraya Saga. The two fell in love and were married. This partnership also marked the start of what would one day grow into Monolith Soft. As Squaresoft shifted its focus away from the SNES and toward the PS1, Takahashi and Saga began the development of their very own game. Now, they initially pitched it as a Final Fantasy game, but Squaresoft executives felt it was too complex to be a Final Fantasy game. Yes, apparently Squaresoft does have a limit on exactly how convoluted a Final Fantasy game can be. We found it. It quickly grew into something entirely new when Takahashi and Saga were given approval to make it into their own game instead. They called this new game Xenogears, and took heavy inspiration from philosophers such as Jung and Freud. The project was ambitious, and credit should be given to Squaresoft for trusting the relatively inexperienced pair with such a massive undertaking. After all, both Takahashi and Saga were both graphic artists, and had little experience with directing an entire game, let alone a JRPG epic. As time wore on and deadlines grew closer, the development team found themselves out of money. Due to these financial and time constraints, the second half of the game was cut down, and certain branches of the project were ultimately left unfinished. Even with these setbacks, however, critics were more than happy with this new game from new developers. Thus, in 1998, the world was introduced to Xenogears, launching the Xeno series and cementing the husband and wife duo in gaming history. Despite the success of Xenogears, Squaresoft felt that their primary focus and resources should be devoted to their established IPs from the SNES era. Final Fantasy, the Chrono series, the Mana series, that stuff. While Xenogears certainly had potential, Takahashi and Saga realized that it would never have the opportunity to grow as they had wanted it to. So, in 1999, the pair, along with several other employees, left Squaresoft to form their own company, Monolith Soft. Lacking the funds or desire to operate completely independently, however, the team looked for investment from a larger publisher. They would find this help and partnership first in Namco. With the freedom to develop their own games and financial backing from Namco, Monolith Soft was now able to start making their sequel to Xenogears. Only one problem: they didn't actually own the rights to the name Xenogears. But the prefix Xeno wasn't owned by anyone. So, by affixing this prefix to their new game, Xenosaga, they were able to establish that it, despite having no legal rights to do so, was in fact a sequel, at least sort of, to Xenogears. Xenosaga was once again written by the husband and wife duo, though officially Saga never actually worked as an employee at Monolith Soft, but was instead a freelancer brought in by the company. This allowed her to continue working on games outside of Monolith, which meant that she and her husband weren't betting the entire farm on Monolith. only half of it. Xenosaga, which released on the PS2 in Japan on February 28, 2002, was conceived as part 1 of a 6-part series. The PS2 hardware allowed the team to create an even more complex narrative as the Xeno series jumped to a fully 3D engine. Like Xenogears before it, combat remained turn-based, and the story once again revolved around deep philosophical issues, this time adding elements of Christian theology into its growing range of influences. Over the next 4 years, the team would make 2 more mainline games in the Xenosaga series, along with 2 mobile games, including a remake of the first 2 Xenosaga games on DS. This would be the series' debut on Nintendo, and though the DS versions never made it out of Japan, it marked the formation of a crucial relationship for the company. Unfortunately, despite the positive reviews and a relative popularity in Japan, the global sales of the series were ultimately disappointing. By the time the 3rd episode released on PS2 in 2006, the Xeno team was experiencing franchise fatigue, due in part to these diminishing returns. During this time, various Monolith developers would be tasked with different projects. As such, much of the original Xeno team was scattered working on different games. But Tetsuya Takahashi was determined that his Xeno series was far from over. In 2006, after the release of Xenosaga Part 3, he was struck with the image of 2 giants who had died in combat. He imagined a world built on the back of these long-dead titans. Excited to boost his compatriots' morale, he showed it to his fellow staff members. The effect was instant. Yasuyuki Honne, fresh off his work on the Beaten Kaito series, immediately began physically constructing a model of these 2 titans. Takahashi himself began posing his own staff members to determine what areas of the giant would make for interesting locations. In 2007, Monolith pitched their new game, Xenoblade, but this time, not to Namco. After a change in direction at Namco, which changed to Namco Bandai during the production of Xenosaga, Monolith felt that their creative freedom was slipping away from them. Combined with the commercial failure of the Xenosaga series, it was clear that something needed to change. It was during this time of crisis that the company received some unexpected encouragement from one of Nintendo's executive directors, Shinji Hitano. Hitano urged the staff at Monolith to not let the sales numbers and concerned executives keep them from making creative new experiences. This might just be the most Nintendo-sounding advice one could ever receive, but hey, it clicked with Monolith Soft. If Nintendo felt that Monolith was making great games, perhaps it should be Nintendo that published them. So in 2007, Nintendo announced that they had purchased 80% of the shares in Monolith Soft. Namco Bandai retained 16%, and Monolith Soft's own executives split the remaining 4%. The result was that Monolith Soft once again had complete creative freedom backed by Nintendo. In exchange, they would now develop software exclusively for Nintendo platforms. Their first few games for Nintendo, Soma Bringer and Super Robot Taisen OG Saga, Endless Frontier, boy that's a name, for the Nintendo DS, and Disaster Day of Crisis for the Wii, brought with them varying degrees of quality and success. Suffice it to say that they weren't Xeno games, and Monolith knew it. The team would continually be leveraged to help in the production of other games, including Super Smash Bros. Brawl. Clearly, however, the heart of Monolith Soft was still very much with Xeno. So it was that in 2010, Xenoblade Chronicles released as a Wii exclusive and wowed both critics and fans.
Long ago, the world was nothing more than an endless sea, cloaked in a boundless sky, reaching as far as could possibly be imagined. Then 2 great titans came into existence. The Bionis and the Mechonis.
Xenoblade brought with it a huge world, which remains one of the most impressive on Wii. An engaging fast-paced battle system to replace the turn-based systems of previous entries, an incredible score composed by some of the greats of the genre, and most importantly, one of the most jaw-droppingly incredible stories in the history of video games. Despite this, Xenoblade's journey to a worldwide audience was fraught with struggles. Around the world, the Wii was largely seen as a system for children, and more adult-focused titles like Xenoblade had traditionally sold poorly. Localizing a game of Xenoblade's size and complexity was an expensive task. While Nintendo of Europe eventually decided it was worth the trouble, Nintendo of America wasn't convinced, and decided that the game would not release in America. Xenoblade became one of several RPGs that failed to win Nintendo of America's approval, along with Pandora's Tower and The Last Story. Needless to say, American Wii RPG fans were starting to feel a little slighted. In an effort to push NOA towards a release of all three games, fans launched Operation Rainfall. Thanks to this movement, the Amazon placeholder for an American release of Xenoblade became Amazon's most pre-ordered game. The campaign even received support from Xeno series co-creator Soraya Saga. Not suspicious at all. Against all odds, Nintendo of America eventually gave in to fan demand, releasing Xenoblade on April 6, 2012. It was an immediate hit and completely sold out. Nintendo of America was shocked, and despite a re-release on the 3DS, the original Xenoblade is still quite expensive to this day. I'm pretty sure I bought my copy during its most expensive period. I'm not proud of it, but I don't regret it. It's an amazing game. With the success of Xenoblade around the world, Monolith Soft was back in gear. Xenogear! Never mind. In 2015, Monolith Soft released a spin-off of Xenoblade, which was already kind of a spin-off of Xenosaga, which was already kind of a spin-off of Xenogears. Moving on. The Wii U received Xenoblade Chronicles X, a completely open-world, sci-fi-inspired spin on the Xenoblade gameplay. Xenoblade Chronicles X was an incredible blend of traditional Western and Eastern RPG gameplay, supporting the rich narrative of JRPGs along with the dynamic freedom of Western RPGs. Xenoblade X puts an incredibly tight focus on the joy of exploration. Your character moves fast and doesn't take fall damage, encouraging the player to leap and bound across the alien world freely, with no regard for any sort of rules. Just as the player feels as though they've seen everything, the story presents them with a mech to let them explore more. Just as they've seen everything with the mech, the story allows the mech to fly. Anywhere. The design philosophies that Takahashi and his team employed in Xenoblade X can be seen as clear influences as immediately as The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. In fact, both the tech and the team of Xenoblade Chronicles X proved to be quite helpful to Aonuma and his team working on The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, but that's a story for another episode. Xenoblade X released on April 29, 2015 in Japan, and around the world on December 4th and 5th of the same year. Despite the Wii U's low install base, Xenoblade X managed to sell around 500,000 copies worldwide, with North America being its most successful market, the same market that Xenosaga had struggled so hard to connect with. And around this time, a very handsome YouTuber made a video about the size and scale of Xenoblade X's world, comparing it to other games and real-life locations. It did pretty well. Some Fallout fans got real angry. Anyway, in 2017, Nintendo released a new game system, the Nintendo Switch, and it quickly outsold the Wii U. It had only been 2 years since the release of Xenoblade X, and Monolith had been busy helping out to finish Breath of the Wild in time for launch. The logical thing to do, given the Wii U's sales, would be to port Xenoblade X to the Switch, but that wasn't their style. Instead, on December 1st, 2017, the Switch received an entirely new Xenoblade title in the form of Xenoblade Chronicles 2, a direct sequel to the original Xenoblade. It was the first game in the series to have a worldwide, synchronized release, and by the end of December, Xenoblade Chronicles 2 had already sold over 1 million units worldwide. It was a strong contender for NWR's Game of the Year award, and widely regarded as one of the Switch's best titles, if not one of the greatest RPGs of the generation. So then, what's next for Monolith Soft? Takahashi himself has alluded to a Switch port of Xenoblade Chronicles X, and many fans have been asking for an HD remake of the original Xenoblade, or even ports of the Xenosaga games to Nintendo platforms. But with Monolith Soft, it's hard to tell. Their very existence comes from a drive to tell deep, complex stories. It comes from the incredible teamwork of a husband and wife seeking to create a unique gameplay experience. Most of all, perhaps, it comes from a team of extremely talented developers seeking creative freedom. A freedom they may have finally found with Nintendo. Thank you all very much for watching, and welcome back to Know Your Developers. We're gonna do more of these. At least that's also what I said back in 2015, and then it didn't happen. But for real this time, we're gonna do more of these. So in the comments, let us know what companies, developers, people you want us to cover on this show. We'll try to make it happen. In the meantime, if you liked the video, give it a like. This is a button. I think it's like there. Maybe it's there. You can also subscribe to Nintendo World Report TV. We do videos like this all the time. We post weekly. There's lots of good Nintendo stuff you can get from us. And of course, check out NintendoWorldReport.com for a whole lot more. You can also join our Discord. There's a link in the description. And if you want to support this channel and the site, you can check out patreon.com/NWR. Once again, I'm John Reardon. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye.